All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here. Today we have a bit of a different type of video. Today I was planning to do like a deck showcase. So I was going to, pick a deck, do some ranked battles and, kind of highlight a particular deck in the metagame. And then I quickly realized, quite honestly, that there wasn't anything new, substantial to talk about. And we've covered a couple of new decks on the channel, but as we've kind of come, about 2.5, almost 3 weeks into this new Fantastical Parade season, this B2 season, I've really realized that a lot of the new cards that were released, specifically the Pokemon, are just not very good. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Why are so many of these new cards underperforming? And if you're questioning, well, are they actually underperforming? The answer is yes. Yeah, a lot of the new cards and new strategies that they added to the game in Fantastical Parade have not had a significant impact on the metagame, at least not in the sense that you might be thinking. So let's talk about it. We're going to start off by talking about some of the core Pokemon, particularly the Mega Pokemon that have struggled, and then we'll kind of get into some of the trainer cards and sort of the overall, aspects of the metagame. This is going to be a bit of a rant video, okay? This is a little bit of a rant, but again, I do think that this is kind of a serious issue. And now I'm not making this video coming from like, the side of where I think that I know more than the developers of Pokemon Pocket. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I just have a particular perspective, and I just kind of wanted to talk about it in today's video because I find it very interesting. So anyway, what we have up on the screen, and before we get into the rant, I suppose, this might be a long video, who knows? You got to go register for PMPT number 20, $200 US cash prize pool. It is Saturday, February 14th at noontime. We always welcome new players. I know Ranked is out, but it should be a ton of fun. We're going to live stream it Saturday and Sunday. Honestly, guys, definitely go register. Link down in the description below. All right, let's push the metagame forward. Maybe something surprises us, this weekend. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, here is the metagame breakdown so far for this season, and we do cover this sometimes on the channel. So what this is here is accumulation of all of the metagame data since the season released. So for Fantastical Parade, as we see, 87 different tournaments, over 14,000 total players competing in these online tournaments, and almost 36,000 matches. So we have plenty of data. All of the data that we have here should be pretty accurate. And when I say pretty accurate, I mean, quite frankly, the most accurate thing available for us to take a look at. And here's what we're looking at. It's filtered right now by the most played decks. As we see, Hydreigon is 16% of the meta share, by far the most played archetype, and a very successful season so far with a 53.24% win rate. If you don't know, that is amongst the highest we've kind of ever seen from a deck seeing this much play in any of the seasons. This is like on the level of performance that, Suicune and Greninja was about 3 or 4 seasons ago, Giratina, Darkrai, things like that. So it's definitely at the very forefront of the metagame. At number 2, Suicune and Greninja, although it's fallen down in play pretty dramatically. We will talk about that because I don't think that there's a real reason why Suicune and Greninja fell in play other than the fact that there's just sort of people were either kind of tired of it, but also, I do think it was kind of the inclusion of Protective Poncho. So we'll talk about it in a little bit. But Suicune here, 51.5% win rate. So again, a pretty average performance here. Definitely not a bad deck. Still a good deck, but only 6% of the meta share, which is pretty staggering. In third, we have Mega Altaria and Chingling here, which is also 6% of the meta share, 52.38% meta share. However, Altaria is split up into a bunch of different categories. So this is the most popular version of Altaria here at about 6% of the total meta share. But if we go down, Altaria Gourgeist is kind of coming in hot here. It's the 7th most played deck so far this season, but has a 3.27%. So you can add that to sort of this Altaria because they're all Altaria decks. And then another one here, which is going to be the standard Mega Altaria with Indeedee, just under 3%. That one's struggling a little bit more, mainly because I think Indeedee is more of a liability these days. But either way, all of the Altaria decks are very successful. In fact, out of all of the average win rates, Altaria is amongst actually kind of the highest so far. There's also Altaria and Greninja. So if you wanted to count that, although I do categorize it a little differently. So if you add up all of the Altaria archetypes, it's going to total to be pretty close actually to Hydreigon, if not potentially a little bit more. I think it's still a little bit under. But Altaria is by far the second most played deck. And I think for good reason. I think Altaria we'll actually pull up examples, by the way, because I know people like to see deck lists. So here's just an example here from a tournament of a Hydreigon deck this season. So we've talked about it a lot of times. Hydreigon is sort of the pure high roll deck of the metagame. To say it lightly, it kind of just carries players. You don't really need to be experienced in the game to be successful with Hydreigon, both in ranked and in tournament play. That might be its own issue. This video isn't necessarily here to talk down about Hydreigon. However, I do think Hydreigon is kind of the #1 culprit for why a lot of the new cards that were released in Fantastical Braid just haven't been that relevant. So again, I think the new cards have affected the metagame. The meta shares and the decks that people are playing this season are different than they were last season, at least the distribution of those decks. And I think a big reason for that is a lot of the new cards that came out, right? So Hydreigon was able to perform very well early in the season, mostly because it had a really strong matchup into basically every single new card that was released, which is very interesting. And anyway, let's go ahead here. I guess we'll just bring up Suicune and I'll do my little coverage here. I think that Suicune Greninja is still a fine deck. I think it actually still does pretty well into Hydreigon, but it's going to struggle in general to keep up with things like Altaria. Chingling is still a significant factor here for Suicune and Greninja. But honestly, the main reason why I think Suicune dipped so far in play this season, if I'm being entirely honest with you, is because of Protective Poncho. People definitely laughed at that as I said it, but the reality is that Protective Poncho is a card that is actually something that is quite good into Suicune and Greninja strategies. Now, Greninja is still popular. I'm not going to say that, Greninja isn't seeing a lot of play. There's Altaria Greninja, there's Mimikyu Greninja, there's Kangaskhan or Oricorio Greninja, Suicune and Greninja. So Greninja is still very common, but Suicune and Greninja specifically, I think early in the season, people just sort of chose maybe not to play it so much. Because of the prospect of Protective Poncho, either seeing a decent amount of play early in the season or potentially just sort of the potential of going up against Protective Poncho, people were a little bit shied away from playing Suicune and Greninja, at least slightly. So a lot of people just were in favor of Hydreigon, and I think Hydreigon was much more well-positioned early in the season. Which is why I think it's continued to be successful as the season has gone on. But anyway, Suicune and Greninja just is still a quality deck list. It's actually won, like Suicune and Greninja to whatever variant you're playing has actually won the last 2 PMPT tournaments, which is hilarious. But again, it's definitely not as prominent as it was before. Now, Altaria is, I think, honestly the best deck in the game right now. The issue with Altaria, I think for a lot of people, is that it's just not as simple to play. Here's just one example. It's not as simple to play as Hydreigon. This is a deck that definitely requires you to kind of make some certain decisions. And honestly, they're not complex decisions in a weird way. Every Altaria deck has a couple of different branching lines that can really benefit or give you a potential to win the game. And I think it's either going to be a turnoff for some people or a deterrent from some people to playing Altaria. But knowing exactly when to stay in with Chingling, when not to stay in with Chingling, whether or not to go into Jirachi or Tapu Lele to hit the bench Pokemon to set up for a Cyrus play, or whether or not to not evolve Altaria and actually utilize the Sing of Swablu. So, I think Altaria is still an incredible deck. In fact, I think it is the best deck, if not the best deck. It's a top 2 deck in the entire game. And it's the only deck that can utilize Chingling to the effectiveness that we want to. So this is another really important aspect of this season of the current metagame is Chingling. I've been saying that Chingling is super impactful for quite some time now. It really is the only thing in the game that can kind of help you in your matchups into Hydreigon, but also Greninja, because they're both stage 2 Pokemon. So it's extremely relevant. The item block, stopping rare candies is very, very impactful. And I think Chingling is sort of the strongest, or I should say the most useful Pokemon in the current metagame. But why aren't more people playing Chingling? That's a big question to me, because Chingling's a really good card, but it's not the most consistent card in the game in the sense that you need to have it in the active spot, right? And you not only do you need it in the active spot, but you can only really play it with something that, kind of fits well with it for different reasons. So Altaria, I think specifically, pairs well with Chingling for 2 reasons. One, Altaria is a stage 1 Pokemon, so it's not that hard to kind of get Altaria on the board, even if you're playing other Pokemon with it. The other concept is Lycia, right? So Chingling, being a baby Pokemon, is searchable with Lycia. You technically would want to play Chingling more so in Lycia decks to make it more consistently, I guess, obtainable, right, into your board. So when you're playing Altaria, we have access to Swablu, we have access to Jirachi, and quite frankly, a lot of other cards here that all fit with Lycia. So it kind of makes sense to play Chingling with Altaria because it's searchable with Lycia, which is a really strong card. And the other thing with Chingling is that sometimes it's not in the active, but sometimes you really do need it in the active spot. So there's times where you would rather, if you did lead Swablu, attach and retreat, and then go into Chingling and go -1 energy. And in a lot of decks, they can't afford to do that because they have high energy attack costs. And Altaria only has a 2 energy attack cost, which I think also is a big reason why it makes a lot of sense to pair it with Chingling. And those are kind of the biggest reasons to me, quite frankly, why I think Chingling is really good in particularly Altaria, but less common in some other decks. And I honestly, the 2 energy attack cost thing is something we'll also talk about, because we need to also talk about, again, the whole point of this video is talking about the problem with the new decks are. We've yet to talk about them, you'll notice. But anyway, Chingling really, really impactful. And the reason Altaria is super relevant is because of that 2 energy attack cost, which I think in general is a really big factor as to why, you know, some of these new cards aren't that relevant. But also Altaria, if you check, is not weak to dark. That's a very significant factor here. Altaria has 190 HP and is not weak to dark. That is a really, really big deal. Anyway, let's just go back, okay? Because again, the whole point of this video here, we're 10 minutes in, we got to talk about the new decks. If we take a look at the metagame, basically is what I was kind of getting at. Like, what stands out here that is actually new? Actually, the most played new archetype in the game is Galarian Obstagoon. And Galarian Obstagoon is objectively just a worse deck than Hydreigon because the Pokemon is worse. It's actually quite a strong deck list, but the issue with Galarian Obstagoon is that it loses dramatically to Hydreigon. So if you were to choose between which one you would rather play, they're both very similar deck lists, you would always choose to play Hydreigon because you know that Hydreigon's going to beat Obstagoon in the head-to-head matchup. So that's the awkward part about Obstagoon. Just one example of a new deck that came out, was very strong, had a lot of potential, but quite frankly just gets absolutely rolled by Hydreigon, so it's never going to see any play. If we go down, the next most played new Pokemon or new strategies this season are the Kangaskhan decks. And Kangaskhan is a very, very interesting example here. And again, I want to talk about Obstagoon really quick because I think the main selling point of Obstagoon is Pierre's, right? Or Piers, I think as some people told me this card is pronounced. Pierre's is a really strong card. In any other metagame, this strategy would be hyper effective. Unfortunately, the #1 most played Pokemon and most played deck in the game is a Pokemon that goes to 0 energies after it attacks and can generate all of those energies back in 1 turn. So the whole aspect of Piers doesn't actually help at all. Like, this doesn't do anything into Hydreigon. So yet again, I understand the strategy. It's a very strong strategy. Discarding 2 energies is crazy. But when your opponent doesn't have any energies and they can get 3 energies in 1 turn to attack you, what's the point of this card? It really doesn't make any sense. So again, Obstagoon heavily countered, in fact, directly countered by Hydreigon, which is quite disappointing. Next up, though, excuse me, let's talk about Kangaskhan, because Kangaskhan's a very interesting example here. Definitely, I think what a lot of people are most excited about, I was really high on Kangaskhan, quite frankly, because it's a super cool Pokemon, and it's very, very flexible. Well, we've seen Kangaskhan play in a lot of different aspects. So we're seeing it with Daycare Kangaskhan. Here's one example. This is going to be sort of, with baby Pokemon, with Turbo Darkrai and stuff like this. And the whole concept here is to play this just like we were playing Arceus and Darkrai back in the day. It's actually not that bad. This is a deck that has a pretty good matchup in Suicune and Greninja. Yet again, unfortunately, these baby Pokemon are a bit of a liability into other Greninja decks. And then at the end of the day, Hydreigon is just something that kind of beats anything that isn't predominantly very, very fast. That's just the reality of it. And I think, honestly, the main issue with Kangaskhan, and I'm just going to say this right off the bat because it has so many things going for it. It's colorless. It does good damage. It's a basic Pokemon, has high HP amount. You could look at Kangaskhan in every single aspect of the word and say that this card is going to be competitively meta viable. And to some degree, it was. But the main issue with Kangaskhan is, and you'll notice, the 3 energy attack cost. So this is like a theory that's been going around for a couple of seasons now, and I think now it's becoming as more truthful than it ever has been before, which is like the 2 energy or less theory. If a Pokemon has a 3 energy attack cost, that means something very significant. It means that if you go first, you're not using this Pokemon. You can't attack with it until your 4th turn if you go first, because you can't attach energies on your 1st turn. That's a really, really big deal. That is a terrifically large deal, especially considering that half the time you're going to go first. So immediately from the pacing side of things, you're struggling. Now you might be saying, well, there's other Pokemon in the game that have 3 energy attack costs that are relevant. Namely, one particular card in particular, which is Hydreigon. But Hydreigon is the exception to the rule. This is a Pokemon that has a 3 energy attack cost, but can get 3 energies in a single turn without even requiring any help from any other Pokemon. It is inherently the most ridiculous thing in the entire game. So Hydreigon is sort of the different example of that. And when you're playing Kangaskhan, you can play other Pokemon to help generate these energies. We have things like that in the game. We have all of the baby Pokemon, as you saw from this deck list. And we also have things like Manaphy. We have the whole lightning package with like Zero Auras and element, like energy switches, all of that stuff. We have the capability to generate additional energies to Kangaskhan, but what you're doing is building an entire deck around getting Mega Kangaskhan in the active, right? And that inherently is going to bring up the core issue of Kangaskhan, which is the fact that it is just one Pokemon and it's worth 3 prizes. The only basic Mega Pokemon that we've seen relevant meta play is Absol, and the only reason Absol ever sees relevant play in the metagame, again, is because it sees play with Hydreigon. We've been saying this since day one. I think a lot of people early on when Mega Rising came out thought that Mega Absol like was one of the best Megas. It's never been one of the best Mega Pokemon. It just pairs with Hydreigon as a very low like a low impact card in this deck, to be fair. Most times when you're playing Mega Absol, you just win games because entirely of Hydreigon. Like, that's the entire concept here. So Mega Absol is the exception to that, but also Mega Absol has an attack cost of 2. So again, it kind of fits the bill as well. It's just something that is, it has the advantage that Kangaskhan and nothing it really else has. And you can't play Kangaskhan in Hydreigon because you have 3 energies in your attack cost, right? How are we going to get those 3 energies? Because you can. It doesn't work that way. So if you're playing Mega Kangaskhan, you have to play other Pokemon that generate additional energies. And when you're playing Pokemon that generate additional energies, those Pokemon aren't doing anything else. Manaphy, Pichu, Mantike, all of the babies, they don't do anything other than generate energy. So we're not putting any pressure in the early game. And effectively, even though we are kind of expediting that 3 energy attack cost, meaning we can attack on turn 3 instead of turn 4, it doesn't matter because in those 3 turns, we're not doing anything except setting up Kangaskhan. So if we're taking that time to set up Kangaskhan and our opponent has a Suicune set up and then a Greninja on the bench set up, or if they have, multiple Hydreigon set up, like, we're just not able to win. And that is inherently one of the factors of, I think, Hydreigon is that in general, and I see that specifically, in general, this is a card that beats basically all other it beats all other Mega Pokemon, just inherently speaking, because this is a Pokemon that's worth 1 prize. It's worth 1 prize, and it does 130 damage for effectively 1 energy attachment, which is crazy, right? So yes, it's a stage 2 Pokemon. There are ways to counterplay it, but when you take a look at all of the other Mega Pokemon in the game, they're just not nearly as strong, right? So because this card's worth 1 point, you would expect a Mega Pokemon to be 3 times as powerful as this, because of course, they're worth 3 prizes, right? That's sort of the balance here. It's weird because Hydreigon came out at the same time as Mega Pokemon. And they basically said, hey, here's Chingling, here's Hydreigon, and here's a bunch of Mega Pokemon that are never going to be competitively viable because we just gave you a single prize Pokemon that's even stronger than the Mega Pokemon. It makes kind of generically no sense. And I don't understand it. I never did understand it. But Hydreigon is kind of the main gatekeeper why most Mega Pokemon aren't relevant. And again, Kangaskhan with a 3 energy attack cost, it's just going to struggle. It really does struggle into Hydreigon, and it's a good Pokemon. It's just, it's not enough. It really isn't. Like, even if this thing had 240 HP, that might be like the only way this Pokemon would see relevant play. If it had 200 HP, I still think it wouldn't be as good. If it had 210, I still don't think it would be as good. And again, like, Mega Stage 2 Pokemon have 220, 210 HP. So it's just like, it's crazy. Hydreigon has 150, does 130. Like, this thing does more damage than Kangaskhan does for 3 energies, and this thing sets itself up. And I get it's a stage 2 Pokemon, I get all that. But with rare candy and copycats and stuff, there's just way more support for a strategy like this than there even is like a basic colorless Pokemon like Kangaskhan, which is crazy if you think about it like that. It really is kind of crazy. So that's my thing about Kangaskhan. It is kind of going to tie into specifically the 3 energy attack cost. That is the one thing holding Kangaskhan back. I promise you, if this was a 2 energy attack cost, this card would be fundamentally broken. It would be one of the best cards in the entire game. It's not. It's a 3 energy attack cost. And having to wait that additional turn or the reliance of playing baby Pokemon to get this thing set up means that, unfortunately, it is much less relevant in the metagame. In fact, the only other Kangaskhan decks that have seen any kind of success have been either with Greninja or Oricorio or both. That is like literally the only ways that you can somewhat be viable with Kangaskhan, because again, like, if you're playing Oricorio, that's just going to win you some games, and if you're playing Greninja, that's also going to win you some games. But compared to other Oricorio decks like Magnezone Oricorio, it's not as successful, and compared to other Greninja decks like Suicune Greninja or Altaria Greninja, it's not as successful, quite frankly. That's the reality of it. In fact, this Greninja Oricorio archetype, which is number 4 on the tier list, which actually, or not on the tier list, but on the metagame ladder here, is actually one of the lowest win rate decks, and they do actually play one Kangaskhan. So this is just another example here of kind of how Kangaskhan has impacted the meta, which is just kind of being a one of in a deck that is probably better not even playing Mega Kangaskhan. Like, that's the crazy part about this here. Also, like, you know, if you're a basic Pokemon, like half the time things like Absol are actually liabilities, because if you're playing Greninja, like a main win condition is actually just getting around the Hydreigons and then just targeting the Absol. Like, that's the thing about these basic Pokemon is you have to bench them. So every sort of turn that Kangaskhan is on the bench getting set up, it can just get hit by a Greninja, damaged on the bench somehow, and then brought in later in the game and then KO'd and then the game's over. So like that's an inherent thing about these Mega Pokemon, and I just don't think the developers made a lot of Megas strong enough, quite frankly. But next up, that's Kangaskhan. We talked about Obstagoon. I want to talk about something that is probably what a lot of people consider to be maybe the most significant, I guess, disappointment of this season, which is Gardevoir. And I also told people Gardevoir is not a bad card, and I really don't think this is a bad card still. I don't think Gardevoir is weak. I just think it's horribly positioned for the metagame. I don't really know what they were thinking. I think if I had to guess, the developers of Pokemon Pocket, when they released this set, gave us a bunch of stuff that is actually pretty good into Suicune and Greninja, but unfortunately is all really bad into Hydreigon. And that's where we're at right now, is none of these new cards, none of these new decks, new strategies can compete with Hydreigon really to any degree. But let's talk about Gardevoir. There's the 15th most played deck here is Gardevoir with Mewtwo EX. That's a 42 or 41% win rate. And then there's a Gardevoir down here just with Indeedee and not Mewtwo, which is also a 41% win rate. So every way people are playing Gardevoir, it has been struggling with Meloetta. It's actually a 45% win rate at the 32nd most played deck. Yet again, just something that's kind of struggling to be competitively viable. Let's just take a look here at an example of Gardevoir. And this is sort of what people are playing. They gave Gardevoir a lot. They really did. They gave this deck kind of everything it needed to be a solid archetype. They gave us Meloetta to kind of find more psychic Pokemon and make that stage 2 or evolutionary process of Gardevoir a little bit more consistent. They gave us Peculiar Plaza to give all of our psychic Pokemon free retreat. And of course, they gave us Diantha to heal 80 damage from a 210 HP stage 2 Pokemon. That is inherently very, very strong. It is strong. In any concept, in any world other than the active world right now, and in any reality other than the reality we live in, this card would be very, very good. But I guess somebody, I don't know why or how, but somebody at Dina completely forgot that a particular card called Hydreigon exists, which again is a dark type Pokemon that hits Gardevoir for 150 damage. Okay, so you might be kind of starting to see like the writing on the wall a little bit here with Gardevoir, is that it's weak to dark, it's a stage 2 Pokemon, and its entire strategy relies on healing out of damage. But again, in the face of Hydreigon, sometimes 2 Hydreigon, sometimes 2 Hydreigon and an Absol, which are all hitting you for weakness, it's not going to go that well. And then fundamentally, hilariously, Gardevoir does 110 damage, which is not even enough to KO a Hydreigon even after it uses Roar in Unison. That's beside Indeedee or Giant Cape or anything else. So it's absolutely hilarious. Hydreigon also plays additional damage modifiers like Rocky Helmet, Poison Barb, Nihilego. So in literally no world, in absolutely no reality here, is Gardevoir ever going to be relevant in the metagame if Hydreigon is something that people play, which again, it is the most played thing in the entire game. It's absolutely insane to me. Like it genuinely is. I actually don't even think Gardevoir maybe has that bad of a matchup into Hydreigon, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. I just think inherently it doesn't have a winning matchup into Hydreigon, which is probably, well, you could probably build Gardevoir to help that matchup for sure. Like you could build Gardevoir specifically in a way to where it can handle Hydreigon. But like, what again, why would we ever play this card? Why would they give us this card in a metagame where Hydreigon is the most popular deck and the most dominant deck in the entire game? It really is kind of baffling. It's crazy to me. Gardevoir is not a bad card. This whole strategy, Gardevoir has so much support going for it. It has Diantha, it has Meloetta, it has the Stadium. It's a strong card. It's a good Pokemon. It's just literally the one thing that, like, they built this exactly in a way that it would lose to Hydreigon for in a concept that I just don't even understand. Even Absol, which can kind of pull your Dianthas out of your hand, even just discard those. that healing factor. It's insane. It's insane to me. I mean, and again, the Gardevoir was the focal point of this set, and this is a strategy that is actually quite good into Suicune and Greninja for every possible concept other than the fact, for basically in every way, for the ways that it's not good into Hydreigon. You know what I mean? Like the healing factor, the high HP, the ability to be effective without having a bunch of Pokemon on your bench means that Gardevoir is actually really strong into Suicune and Greninja inherently, but just really poor into Hydreigon. Why? I don't understand it. I don't get it. It all kind of points back to Hydreigon. Gardevoir specifically, I think Kangaskhan, it's a 3 energy attack cost, and that kind of put it dead in the water, quite frankly. Gardevoir, it's just really bad into Hydreigon, so that's, again, the inherent downside. Let's talk about something else, some stuff that's maybe a little bit more niche. Let's talk about, I don't even know, like, what else are people playing? Nothing really. I guess we could talk about Swampert. Let's talk about Swampert EX. Because I actually think that this is a totally fine Pokemon. Like, out of everything in the game that they released in Fantastical Parade, I think that Mega Swampert's actually, like, one of the more fine Pokemon, like, in a weird way. I think that this is like, when you're playing Swampert, the entire strategy is similar to how when you're playing Kangaskhan or anything else, is to set this thing up and then hopefully you can just win the game outright. And Swampert actually does that somewhat effectively. It's got a ton of HP. You can play Irida, you can play Lily with it, you can play Heavy Helmet with it. And you're doing 150, which means you are KOing a lot of Pokemon in one hit. That includes Hydreigon, that includes Suicune, and all these other cards that people play in the metagame. So that's really good, but then you could also discard energy. So even on Pokemon that we're not one-hit KOing, we can possibly discard their energies and then stop them from setting up a second Pokemon. Or if we get lucky, we discard 2 energies from their Pokemon, and then they just can't attack on the next turn. So Swampert's actually a very effective sweeper. It's not a bad card whatsoever. The inherent downside to Swampert, as we've known with all of the other Pokemon in the game, is that it's 3 energies to attack with this thing, and it's a stage 2 Pokemon. So, like, there's just a little bit going. Like, there's enough going against Swampert to where it just doesn't really make sense to kind of invest your entire deck into going into a Mega Swampert and then hopefully winning that way. Not to mention Hydreigon, which is a very important factor here. When you have 230 HP and you have Heavy Helmet and you have Lilies and whatnot, you might be like, well, maybe we can still make it work, right? Maybe we can kind of KO a Hydreigon once or twice. We can do all that. The issue with Swampert, unfortunately, is that even with the high HP amount, even with the attack cost here, it just can't get through double Hydreigons and an Absol. Like, it just can't, especially with the Poison Barb 9 Lego stuff, right? Because Hydreigon's hitting for 130, but with Poison ticking, you're taking 20 damage after that, so that's 150, and then at the end of your turn, because you're not moving out of the active spot with Swampert, you're taking an extra 20 damage, that's 170 times 2, and then you got to deal with the Absol, which you're not one KOing. Swampert just can't beat Hydreigon. And again, strategies like this, which are pretty common, we have a lot of these Pokemon, things like Ampharos EX or Venusaur EX, like they can't, even Charizard, they just can't deal with Hydreigon because they have to KO one of them, then 2 of them, and then also get through Absol. Like, none of them are just kind of positioned in a way to be able to do that in a way that's just kind of frustrating for the metagame. So I love Mega Swampert. I actually do. I think this card is like somewhat balanced. There's a lot of water energy acceleration in the game. We have Irida, we have Lily, we have Manaphy, we have Mantike. You have Protected Poncho if you want to stay protected on the bench from Greninja. There's a lot of things. You can even play Indeedee with this if you really, really wanted to. It's not a bad card. It's just, again, not something that is positioned in a way at all to deal with Hydreigon and just the nature of what Hydreigon is. And it's, again, inherently a slow deck. So that is, considering if we can even get Swampert set up before we get turn 2 blasted by Hydreigon. That's a 41% win rate this season. We can take a look at the matchups, I suppose. 40% into Hydreigon. Struggles actually in a lot of stuff, but look at that. Good into Suicune. It's good into Suicune, which is relevant. We're also going to just auto-lose to Oricorios, which is probably another significant factor about this deck. Also auto-losing into Altaria because of Chingling stuff. So just too much really in the way, quite frankly, for Swampert, but really not a bad card. A card that I actually kind of like a lot, but I don't think was ever really designed to be at the forefront of the metagame, And I think the same thing about Mega Mawile, quite frankly. I think Mega Mawile is, again, just a complete meme card. Let's talk about Mega Mawile, too, because this is a card that is very interesting for whatever the reason. If this Pokemon, and again, this is a 2 energy attack cost Pokemon, so you'd be like, all right, like, maybe we can play this. Maybe, and again, they gave Mega Mawile a bunch of stuff. They gave us Metal Core Booster, right, which is pretty relevant. They gave us Lucky Ice Pop, right? These are cards that are really good. Starting Plains is another card that can buff the HP of Mawile. The issue with Mawile is that it just is slow. It doesn't do anything. It does 60 damage and then 90 and then 120. How are we supposed to beat Hydreigon with this card? Can somebody explain to me? Like, what is this thing actually supposed to do in a metagame where every game is going up against a Hydreigon that by turn 2 or turn 3 at the very latest is going to be hitting you? And we can't even like 2 or 3 KO a Hydreigon. It's just fundamentally crazy to me. It really is. Like, I just don't really know what they're thinking. All of these Mega Pokemon are probably totally fine in nature, but when you compare them to Hydreigon, they just don't make any sense. Look at this card. Look at this. This is an objectively stronger card than any other card in the game, probably, and it's worth 1 prize. It's worth 1 point. If this was an EX card, it would still be extremely relevant. Like, it would be, even with the same HP amount, the same attack, everything, if it was worth 2 prizes, this would still be one of the most competitively relevant Pokemon in the entire game, and it's worth 1 point. It's worth 1 point. Look at Mawile. Look at this Mawile card. It's worth 3 points. If this thing goes down, the game is over. You can KO double Hydreigon, and you still don't win the game. But if you KO 1 Mawile, you win the game. So it's like, it's just crazy to me. And I understand, like if there was a Mega Pokemon that specifically was really good into Hydreigon, then that could balance out the metagame. It's just, Hydreigon's been around for the last 3 seasons, and they haven't given us anything in terms of a Mega Pokemon that actually does substantially well into Hydreigon. Altaria is really the only example of that, and that's because Altaria sees play with Chingling. Without Chingling, I don't think Altaria does well into Hydreigon, quite frankly. I think it just loses. So it's absolutely insane. Mawile, this is just in generally a weak card. I just don't really know what they were thinking here. I understand you're supposed to play, Galarian Berserker and Metal Core Booster and take 50 less damage every turn. Like, you're not winning. You're not beating Hydreigon with this. You are beating maybe some things. Again, double energy in the attack cost is actually kind of nice. You're like, okay, and it's one colorless, so you could power this thing up. You could generate additional energies to it. But again, like, if you go first and you lead Mawile, like, you lose, the game's over. You can't, this is a card that needs to attack immediately and then slowly ramp. If we have to wait 3 turns to attack with Mega Mawile, you stand literally 0 chance of winning. I don't care how many Metal Core boosters you get into play. It's just not, it's not going to work out for you. So I just don't really know. I don't know conceptually kind of what they're thinking with these Mega Pokemon. It's very odd and very, very strange. It's just such a weird world we live in where, again, they put out the Mega Pokemon. Blaziken's actually pretty good, which is funny. Blaziken and Altaria are probably the 2 best Mega Pokemon in the game, which is hilarious to me because they are effectively like the same Pokemon. Just one has a little more HP and needs rare candy, and the other one does a little more damage. And the other one's, a little bit lesser, but it's a stage 1 Pokemon. And Blaziken, again, has Flame Patch, but it's a 2 energy attack cost. So, and again, we all know how much Blaziken has impacted the metagame, which is like not very much. But when you take a look at all of the Megas available to us, like, Blaziken's probably like one of the best Mega Pokemon in the game. And I think purely it's because it's a 2 prize attacker and not a 3 prize attacker. So they already did that. They did that immediately off the bat. They gave us Blaziken and Altaria, but for some reason, every other Mega after that just hasn't been up to par. I don't get it. I don't understand. It is, quite frankly, very bizarre. Very, very bizarre. Alola Ninetales, I guess we can talk about because I think that this is a really fun deck. This is more of like a pet deck. I actually really like the concept of Alola Ninetales. Again, not making it so they can't attach any energies to their energy zone is different than discarding energies, right? So we're stopping them from being able to generate energies, which does technically stop a Hydreigon from being able to power itself up in the active spot. And that's pretty cool. But again, unfortunately, you are allowed, I don't know if people know this, you are allowed to attach energies to Pokemon on your bench. That is inherently the thing here with Alola Ninetales. And again, this would be a pretty decent strategy in a world where every deck had a 3 prize Pokemon that would be stuck in the active spot until they lose, right? That is how you win with Ninetales. But unfortunately, that's not what the metagame is. The metagame is single prize Pokemon hitting you for 130 damage and generating 3 energies on 1 turn. I know it generates 2, but you can just manually attach for 1. So that's the metagame. In a world where Hydreigon exists, Ninetales will never see play. So yet again, another card that was just sort of put into the game, completely ignoring the fact that Hydreigon was already the most played, most dominant deck. Why is that? I just don't understand it. Can somebody explain to me? I understand, I understand what these cards are meant to do. I just don't understand releasing them all collectively in a metagame that obviously everybody's playing Hydreigon. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why. Is it because they're unable to make something that's strong into Hydreigon? Like, I don't know what's going on here. It just doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense to me. Anyway, let's talk about the only new Pokemon that is really, I would consider to be competitively viable this season, which is actually Mimikyu, which is pretty funny. Because Mimikyu is not a Mega Pokemon. It is a EX Pokemon. It's just a 2.2 prize Pokemon here, and it has a broken ability. It's just a psychic 2 prize broken ability Pokemon, and that's all we kind of have gotten really in terms of Pokemon that are competitively viable in this new season. And again, I knew Mimikyu would be good. I wasn't positive, of course, how the metagame would develop, because Mimikyu's really strong in particular scenarios, and uniquely actually is good into Hydreigon. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that Mimikyu is actually pretty decent into Hydreigon, because they have to attack to break your disguise, and if they do, then they take extra damage, and you're guaranteed to live 2 turns, so you can get, you know, the 70 damage attack off. And Mimikyu's a really, really good card. It just is, quite frankly, a good card. To be honest with you, though, I think the only reason why Mimikyu has remained competitively viable into this new season is because it has great synergy with Greninja, which is what a lot of people are angry about. I think a lot of people, when they see a deck and it plays Greninja, they just don't want to hear about it. You know, they're just going to complain because Greninja's been around for so long, and the strategy of Greninja Cyrus is, quite frankly, a bit toxic. And I do agree with that. I think Greninja is inherently the only reason why a lot of decks see competitively like viable play in the meta. There's really only a couple of strategies that don't play Greninja that are worth playing, and that is Hydreigon or Altaria and Chingling. Like that is the metagame. You're either playing a Greninja deck, or you're playing Hydreigon, or you're playing Altaria. And if you're playing Altaria, you got to play with Chingling, because that's how you play Altaria. And that's the metagame that they've kind of built for us for some reason. But yeah, Mimikyu's a really good card. And I think, again, if this was, you know, a Mega Pokemon, which I know there isn't a Mega Mimikyu, but if this had 160 HP and did 90 damage and was worth 3 prizes, it would be probably less good. Yeah, it would be significantly less good, actually, just because of the fact that you don't lose the game when it gets KO'd, which is such a weird factor about Mega Pokemon. It really is. Like, it's like the only Mega Pokemon in the game that can function the way that you want it to, that the developers designed them to, is going to be something like Altaria with Chingling, and Hand Disruption and things like that, or Blaziken with like Heatmore, and then you just sort of, you know, attack KO, and hopefully you can win. Like those are the only Mega Pokemon that are like competitively viable. And of course you can play Absol, but you're not actually playing Absol. You're just playing Hydreigon, and then you have that Absol in the deck, because it's like you would probably rather play it than not, which is the weird thing about Hydreigon, is that it sees play with Absol, but Absol is really the least important aspect of this deck. It really is. In fact, if you lead Absol, it's like the worst thing you can do. So most of the time, you just don't even want Absol. You're just playing it to hopefully have it as an option in the late game. You know what I mean? In case your Hydreigons go down. If you could play 3 copies of Hydreigon and Dino, this would be, that's what people would play, quite frankly, because that's what the deck wants. That's what it does. So again, I know this was a bit of a rant video, kind of all over the place, but again, there's just, I wanted to make a deck showcase video today. There just wasn't anything to showcase. There's nothing new that I think I would actually recommend from a competitively viable perspective. And I'm not going to sit here and highlight a deck. I'm not going to make a Metacham Mega Metacham video. I'm not going to do that. But Mega Metacham is in the metagame right now. It has entered in as a promo card, and we can actually, I'll just pull this up for reference. I know it's a promo card, so it probably isn't something like worth mentioning, quite frankly, but typically promo cards are really, really bad. But we can take a look at Metacham. Somebody played it today. I'll find it right here. 4-3, Skylar 33 from Croatia. Shout out to Skylar. Let's talk about Mega Metacham for a sec, because again, guys, I get it's a promo, and all promo megas really aren't that good, but it's a 3 energy attack cost. It's a 3 energy attack cost, guys. Like, the whole way that you play Metacham is by playing it with Psychic Pokemon and then moving those energies to Mega Metacham. So you have to play it with things like Giratina and Dawn. I actually don't know if there's any other way to play this card viably. And even if you satisfy all of those conditions, you deal 140 damage. That's the condition. Whereas you could just play Altaria, and for 1 less energy of only 1 type, you know, you have more HP and deal 130 damage. It just doesn't, I don't get it. I understand it's a promo card, so it's not good, but I think Mega Metacham is a great example of a card that is just literally built to not be meta relevant. I just don't understand. I don't get it. I don't get it. Something's up. Something is up, quite frankly, with Fantastical Parade. Because every single new thing they put into the metagame isn't bad. Like, not everything here sucks. It's just all bad into Hydreigon. They just gave us a bunch of cards that lose to Hydreigon, and I don't understand it. I don't get I don't understand the thought process. Maybe the developers were just like a couple of months behind. So like maybe they developed the set. That's kind of my speculation, in fact. That if I had to guess, I would say the developers kind of built this set and built these cards at a time where Suicune and Greninja was by far the most dominant deck of the metagame. And by the time this released, the metagame was different, and it just sort of hit in the opposite way that they wanted it to. That's my feeling, because Gardevoir kind of seems specifically good into the Suicune Greninja stuff. I think that Protective Poncho came out in the game as well. Even Mawile is actually not even that bad. Kangaskhan, these are cards that, because you can play with Daycare, these are all things that are good into Suicune. All of these new things are actually pretty good into Suicune and Greninja, or respectable at least, but they all lose so badly. They all lose so badly to Hydreigon. It's so confusing to me. I just don't understand. I think honestly they're just behind. I think that the set was built and designed too long ago for it to have relevant impact on the metagame. That's my theory. Next up, though, let's talk about some of the trainer cards that, again, are good cards. They just don't really see much play for whatever the reason. Let's talk about Sightseer. This is an interesting card. I think dynamically, this is like something that is always going to have to compete with Copycat, right? So we have Professor's Research in the game, and they gave us Copycat, which means that if you're ever going to play like a draw supporter card, or a card that doesn't like boost damage, like not like the utility supporters, not things like Sabrina, Cyrus, Red, Giovanni. If you're going to play a supporter card that pulls cards out of your deck or helps you find Pokemon, it has to be either more useful than just a draw 2 in Professor's Oak or Professor's Research, or Copycat. And I'm going to tell you right now, no matter what deck you're playing, maybe you play one of, or Lissia. Lissia's a great example as well. Even May. Sightseer is not a bad card by any stretch of the imagination. There's just never really a time where playing Sightseer is going to be better than playing Research or Copycat. You know what I mean? It just doesn't, it's not, you're looking at the top 4 cards of your deck, so in the late game it can be useful, but if you don't have your Pokemon up by the late game anyway, then this card isn't very useful to you at all, because if it's a stage 1 Pokemon, you're going to want it on turn 2, and by turn 2 you have like probably 13 cards in your deck, so the probability of finding the Pokemon isn't even that high. Just an interesting card. I think Copycat's just better. So again, Sightseer kind of missing the mark, but I do like the stage 1 support, although what stage 1 Pokemon came out in this set that we were supposed to be playing Sightseer with? Does anyone even know? What Ninetales? Is that what they gave us for? Is this supposed to be more support for Altaria? I don't really understand it. I really don't. We talked about Diantha. We talked about Pierre's. These are good supporter cards. They just don't, they're not relevant in the metagame. It's so crazy to me. These are things that just don't help you at all into Hydreigon. They don't help you at all. Pierre's in Obstagoon would be really nice to, remove energies early game from Suicune Greninja, and it probably is. Diantha to heal basically all of the damage that Suicune's going to do to your Gardevoir. Very, very good. None of these are helpful into Hydreigon. Protect the Poncho. It's really nice. Look at it. Stops Greninja pings. It's definitely not stopping Hydreigon, hitting you for 130 on turn 2. That's for sure. That is for sure. Let's talk about Lucky Ice Pop. Let's talk about Lucky Ice Pop, which, to be fair, I think is probably the most significant, impactful card this season, which is hilarious because this card is so ridiculous. This is the craziest card I've ever seen. What I love the most, though, about Lucky Ice Pop, and we've talked about it a lot, my favorite thing about Lucky Ice Pop is that it's utilized extremely well in Hydreigon. That's my favorite thing about this card, is that it actually just is a card that buffs Hydreigon. Why Suicune doesn't need this. Gardevoir doesn't need this. Altaria doesn't need this. But Hydreigon does, so let's just make this card. Give it to Hydreigon. Like, why not? You know what I mean? Let's just make Hydreigon better. It's so fundamentally, concerning to me. I don't get it. Again, this is a total rant video. You guys can comment down below. But honestly, guys, my perspective here, and I gave my reasonings why all of these new Mega Pokemon just aren't good. But at the end of the day, it really just chalks up to all of these cards not being, viable into the Hydreigon matchup specifically. That's kind of what it chalks down to, and it's not an issue with Hydreigon. It's just they specifically built all of these cards, other than Mimikyu, I would say. They specifically built all of these cards for reasons that just aren't to beat Hydreigon. And here we are. Just everyone's playing Hydreigon, losing to Hydreigon. And that's kind of the state of the metagame. So, quite frankly, if we don't see something next set on February 26th, if we don't see something that is either just fundamentally strong into Hydreigon to push it down to the metagame, or a specific counterplay to Hydreigon, we're absolutely cooked because there's literally nothing in the game worth playing other than just playing this high roll Hydreigon slop, or playing Chingling Altaria, which is, again, the only competitively viable strategy that is good into Hydreigon. And you can play Suicune, but Suicune's becoming less and less good into Hydreigon. And quite frankly, it loses to Altaria. So that's kind of the issue with Suicune. And it loses to a lot of this new stuff, which I don't think really matters anymore, but, is kind of a factor, I think, still. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. They tried, I think, to counter things like Suicune and Greninja specifically, with Protective Poncho. They tried. They definitely did. They were like, hey, listen, Protective Poncho, Gardevoir, we gave you some stuff. You have Chinglings, you got all of that. I get it. I do get it. This to me is the most hilarious example of, And it's hilarious to me as well, because like the developers obviously know what's going on, right? So they made some type of an attempt here to help balance the metagame, but they're balancing around the wrong stuff. They really are. Like, I'm not saying Greninja's like should be counterplayed or should be left alone, because Greninja's yeah, certainly one of the biggest issues of the metagame. But at least the good thing about Greninja is that you can play it with anything you want. You know, like the inherent strategy of Greninja is really strong, but at least it's not just one strategy. You know what I mean? And Greninja itself really isn't like that toxic of a strategy, in the sense that it's very good and very annoying to play against. But it's not the most easy like strategy in the world. Like knowing where to kind of put the 20 damage, like effectively does make Greninja a bit more of like a skill gap deck than something like Hydreigon, which doesn't, it only has one option, and that's just to hit you in the face. So anyway, that's my rant. I don't know. If you ask me what went wrong with this set, which is again probably the whole point of this video, is that they just, they were either behind, or they were just maybe, again, I think they designed this set at a time where the metagame was different. And the metagame changes rapidly. So if this was made 2-3 months ago, then I totally understand where they're coming from, trying to, you know, reel it back a little bit with the Greninja stuff. But at the same time, that's not the issue. When this set came out, that was not the issue whatsoever. And maybe it kind of was. But again, like if we take a look at that metagame tab, like the most played Greninja deck is only 6% of the meta, and Greninja Oricorio is only 4%, and then Altaria Greninja is only 2%. So literally less than 10% of the total metagame this season is Greninja. So to me, that's really not that big of an issue, you know? And I'm not even saying this metagame is unhealthy. Like if we take a look at it, it's actually a totally fine metagame. There's a lot of competitively viable decks. So there's a lot of variety. The issue here is that none of it's new stuff. They just, nothing. The issue isn't with the metagame this season. The issue is with the new set. You know what I mean? Like that's the whole point of this video. So I actually think the meta is totally fine. I get it. Like high roll slop Hydreigon is annoying, and people still are just tired of Greninja, but Greninja is less than 10% of the meta share. It really is. And Oricorio barely sees any play now, which is sad because of Hydreigon. You know, you have Altaria, you have got Suicune Greninja, you have Hydreigon, you got some other stuff, but that's really the only stuff that really matters. Mimikyu is a really fun inclusion to the game. I'm happy about it. I wish Kangaskhan was a little bit better. I think Charizard got retroactively buffed, which is really cool. Giratina Darkrai somewhat kind of snuck back into the metagame a little bit. You know, Indeedee is still prominent. These Indeedee heavy helmet strategies, which are pretty cool. But at the end of the day, the main problem with Fantastical Parade is that none of these cards were designed properly to deal with Hydreigon. And I think we're seeing the impact of that right now. There's just nothing in the game other than Chingling. There's literally nothing in the game to stop Hydreigon from just rolling over your deck. And all of these new cards just lose to Hydreigon. So that's my theory here, is that they designed these sets a little bit too far in the past, maybe? Because I get the release cycle. Like, I'm not trying to flame them for that. It's just that I think inherently they can't just sort of make an entire set, you know, during the month as the meta is reflecting, and then, you know, come out with a new set. Maybe they do that. I don't know. Maybe the set was designed three months ago. I really don't know. I don't know what's going on here, but at the end of the day, that's what's going on here. That's my rant. That's my problem with all of these new cards, is that they all lose to Hydreigon. That's it. That's what's going on here, which is pretty funny. That's my rant. And anyway, that's the video. So again, very ranty here, a long video. I just wanted to talk about the new cards because it is such a bizarre example. It really is. Like, I think a lot of people are going to look at this set and be like, man, like this is all of this stuff's pretty much useless, which is crazy because a lot of the new stuff's strong. It's not about how good the cards are. It's just about how they interact with what's seeing play in the metagame, and Hydreigon seeing play. So that's the issue here. And not every card can come out, right? And I'm not angry here. I'm not trying to flame the developers of Pokemon Pocket. I'm just saying it's just what I noticed, you know. I just wanted to talk about it because honestly, it's just hilarious to me. It's crazy. Absolutely insanity. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Sorry for this absolute rant video. Again, I wanted some gameplay video. There's just nothing. I have already showcased everything there is to showcase in terms of meta relevant decks, and I'm not going to highlight something that is just quite frankly not good in the metagame. So there we go. Hopefully we go live tonight, maybe later, for some ranked battles. That could be pretty fun. I don't know what I'm going to play. Maybe we'll spin the wheel once again to choose the decks. But anyway, don't forget to go play in PMPT number 20. Where is it? We'll find it here. Look at this. Upcoming. You go to upcoming, you go to limitless.com, you scroll down, and it's going to be right here. PMPT number 20, Fantastical Fantasy. Link to register down in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. Again, I actually really do enjoy Pokemon Pocket right now. I like playing, and I like the metagame. It's just it's just so funny to me. It's so funny how they could release an entire set of cards and literally nothing is relevant into Hydreigon. It's crazy. If we got to see something, man. We do. We really do. Man, it's a good one. All right, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Sorry for this random video, but whatever. You know, it is what it is. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.